Hello, annyeonghaseyo. Wow, this is incredible. I am so excited. I hope you're excited because I certainly am. We have so many amazing speakers. We have so many innovators, startups, investors here. During these next 3 days, we are going to have so many amazing conversations and outcomes, I'm very sure. In putting this event together, the city of Busan and Fly Asia 2022 have really lifted the startup community here in Busan, working to create this new ecosystem, extend the ecosystem that is so necessary for innovation, not just here, but throughout all of Asia. For me, as a futurist, this is so important because innovation is how we build the future. This is something that is really something our species does so much so well. It's how we have become the society we are today. We innovate, we change, we see a problem, and we deal with it. Because of this, in many respects, innovation is the most powerful force on our planet. But you don't need to take my word for it. Many other people have said this as well, including Bill Gates from my own hometown of Seattle. Now, I'm going to be talking today about the future of this ecosystem. It's a little bit different talk than some of the other speakers are going to be covering, which will probably be a little bit more oriented toward business, toward case studies and so forth. I'm actually going to, as a futurist, explore some of the possibilities of where this startup ecosystem could go, not just in terms of the services and the support that it could provide for startups, but also the opportunities for innovation that they will actually be able to provide and hopefully create and invent in the course of these coming years. But before we get too far along, I do want to share one little secret, and that's that the future doesn't exist. That's right. You think about it. We have the present, it's all of this, it's the here and now. We know what that is. And the past, well, it used to be our present. But the future is something else entirely. The future is not someplace out there, it's not some time out there. It's basically in our heads. We work, we see different opportunities, we see places that need to improve, things that need to change, things that could make our lives better. And we dream about it, we plan about it, and we make things happen. And as we build that future, as we innovate, we turn that future into our present. And that's what this conference is really going to be about. These startups that are going to be making our future happen. So, as we get going, I want to start off with just a couple of little pieces of foundational information before we start talking about the future itself. One thing I want to touch on is the idea of the lone inventor, the myth, basically, of the lone inventor. This is an assumption. It's not true. No one operates in a vacuum. Whether you're Thomas Edison, Elon Musk, Albert Einstein, you didn't create it out of thin air. You had all of the other people, all of the rest of society, all of the other infrastructure, education, knowledge, all of the geniuses that have come before you to help build the world. So when I think about the nature of innovation, of creativity, of building the future, I'm more inclined to think about somebody like Sir Isaac Newton, who is famous for having said, among other things, if I have seen further, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants. That, to my mind, captures the true nature of how people build the future, because essentially he recognizes that it's because of all the work, all the other things that have come before him, that he's been able to do the things that he did. So when I say society, I'm really talking about networks, and networks are what really drive all of this. When we talk about building an ecosystem, that's a network. Think about every single network in our world, whether we're talking about biological cells, the internet, cities, corporations, the neurons in our brain. They all work as networks. If you take a single node, a single neuron, single piece, it's not very impressive by itself. It can't do very much. Combine them together, put together thousands or millions or billions of them, and suddenly magic happens. Suddenly you have synergy that leads to a situation where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That is amazing to me, but that is the benefit of us leveraging this kind of network behavior. So when we create this ecosystem, when we create new means of support and communication, we drive innovation, we drive progress. Because of this, this leaves us with some really big responsibilities. It gives us an awful lot of power over our world. So we have to think, what do we do with that? How do we ensure that we innovate in a way that is responsible, that is beneficial to as many people as possible, that protects our planet? All of these are important things for us to consider as we move forward with building the world that we want to see happen. Oops, that is not the direction. So a couple of basics as we think about this. One of the things that's going to be driving a lot of the business, a lot of the commercial opportunity for these startups is demographic. Just as simple as that. We've just this current month, here in November, reached the point where the world reached 8 billion people as a population. Some people think that's a big deal. Some people think that's pretty much business as usual. One thing I do know is that it is going to continue for a number of more decades. And that is going to lead to significant increases in this region and others. As for Asia specifically, we're talking by the middle of the century, an additional 750 million people, 750 million more people just in Asia alone. Far more important than that is the fact that we're going to be seeing something on the order by the middle of the century of 2 billion more people in Asia, basically in the middle class. That's going to drive an enormous amount of consumer demand, consumption, needs for services, needs for new ways of doing things. So given that, how do we balance that? We know that people want better things. They want a better life. And it's only fair that they should be able to have that. How do we balance that while still at the same time ensuring that we protect our planet as well? Because ultimately we have one home. We're not moving to Mars anytime soon, and we need to do what we can to ensure that the choices, the ways that we build the future, also take care of planet Earth as well. When we talk about looking ahead to how we're going to build this, one of the things that Peter Drucker, father of modern management theory, said was, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So measurement is certainly important. There's a lot of good data out there already about entrepreneurship. Somebody like Global Entrepreneurship Monitor regularly surveys and puts out data about all the different countries, what the state of their entrepreneurship is within their country. Korea actually ranks quite well on a few different fronts and not so well on a few others. In terms of government support and the nature of the internal dynamics of the economy, really good. couple of other areas are needing a little bit of improvement. It seems like, according to the survey, that there's need for more later education at the university and college levels for being able to understand and learn how to actually build a business, that there isn't enough support on that level. So there are opportunities there for improvement, but the point is, by measuring now, we can understand better later how far we've come and if we've hit our goals and so forth. Ultimately, today we're going to talk about what is the future of the startup ecosystem. This is something that, as a futurist, is really fascinating to me, because at certain levels, when we talk about the future, we're building on what has already come before. So we're going to certainly have some of the same types of institutions, some of the same kinds of contributors to that ecosystem. We've got the investors, we've got research and development, we have academics, and so forth. We're going to still have that, but a number of these are going to be changing over the coming years. And for me, as a futurist, one of the areas I definitely think about that's going to impact pretty much all of these different areas is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has been with us for 70, 80 years now. It's really getting good, it's really getting powerful, and yet there are so many things that it still doesn't do well. Well, we're moving into an era when different researchers are working in something that's being referred to as the third wave of AI. These are basically forms of artificial intelligence that perform something much more close to what we think of as abstract reasoning. They won't achieve this the same way we do, but they will be a much more useful tool by being able to replicate some of these aspects of our own cognitive abilities. Some of these are going to include the ability to learn much more like we do, much more like a child does, from a handful of examples rather than needing literally millions of images to be able to recognize what a horse is or what have you. This is called one-shot learning, or sometimes zero-shot learning for other forms of it. We're going to see machine common sense. People are already doing a lot of work with this. Understanding causality, cause and effect. All of these moving into an area of AI that is much, much more like we perform certain types of reasoning in our human minds. This is, for some people, scary, but it really isn't that much. They will still remain tools. We're not turning these into machines that can take over the world, as cinema and Hollywood love to talk about. We're talking about a continuation of what we've been doing for a very, very long time, which is building better and better tools. When you apply this to certain areas, such as the research and development portion of our ecosystem, this is going to create some really interesting opportunities. One example I love to give that is actually it's been around for a little while. It's about 15 years old. 15 years ago, NASA wanted to create an antenna for one of its satellites. It needed to be very, very small. They had very specific specifications, and it needed to be able to handle certain specific frequencies. They gave the problem to something called a evolutionary algorithm, which kind of does encode what natural selection does in nature. And it went through generation after generation, slowly improving on that antenna, until it came up with something about the size of a coin that looked like a bent paperclip that no human engineer ever would have come up with. And lo and behold, it did exactly the right job, but it was not created by human hands at all. So that's pretty cool. But that's 15 years ago. Think about how much has been happening in computing and artificial intelligence in just the last 15 years. And because of that, we're going to see more and more what we call hybrid intelligence developing. The more seamless use of AI in our own work, in different aspects of our world, not in some scary Matrix, Terminator, Star Trek, Borg kind of way, but as a continuation of the kind of interfacing that we've been doing with our technology ever since we put letters and text on a page, or the way we use computers today, or the way we use our smartphones. It's just a continuation of that, really. And by using that hybrid intelligence, we'll continue to design and create some really fascinating things. One example, about 2 years ago, a couple of developers wanted to design a whole range of mid-century modern chairs. They took and used what is called in AI, in computer science, a generative adversarial network. Basically, two computers that play back and forth against each other to generate all of these possible chairs. Some of them were really wild looking, some were totally unusable, and some were really fascinating designs that maybe a human might not have ever come up with. This little snippet you see in the upper right-hand corner is only a small portion. There were literally thousands of these. And it's just fascinating to think of that as being this partner, this helper for designers as they go through their process. And then in this current year, we've actually moved to some really amazing technology referred to sometimes as an AI image generator. Or it's basically a system that draws on all of the images that have almost ever been created, anything that's on the internet, and tied it to the text that has been applied to them over these years. And by using this algorithm, they're able to create absolutely fascinating AI-designed imagery. And this is just the beginning, because we're also talking about extending this to the 3D area. We're already getting into that. And the opportunity to use this kind of tool for things like rapid prototyping, being able to explore a range of different domain spaces as you're exploring your next product, that's really, I think, very, very powerful stuff. When we explored using AI for all kinds of other aspects of our ecosystem, whether it's our new business models, corporate structures, financing, different types of advisors, it's really interesting to think about how we might one day have AI advisors for certain startups, how finance is going to draw on a whole range of DeFi, decentralized finance, whether that ends up being some version of cryptocurrency or blockchain, some method of crowdsourcing, some method of microfinancing. There's all kinds of opportunities, and that's just where we are today. We know that we got from the cryptocurrency period, that just started 15 years ago. In the next 20 years, we could see some other really interesting approaches and methods to being able to fund these startups as they get started. Corporate structures, we may have entire businesses that are run by an AI, even an AI CEO. There are a few goofy companies out there, they say they have an AI CEO, but they don't really at this stage in the game. Business models, we're already moving into an era when we have subscription models and a whole range of different approaches to creating wealth, creating income and revenue that we didn't even have possible 30 years ago, before we had the level of cellular and communications capabilities, mobility and otherwise, a bunch of things that simply weren't possible because the technology wasn't there. Remote collaboration is also going to have to continue to evolve, continue to develop. We jumped ahead quite a ways in this past couple of years because of COVID, and we've been able to do amazing things, but I think we're all kind of tired of some of the ways that we're having our remote sessions and so forth. You can only make so much connection and so much collaboration with somebody on the other side of a flat rectangular screen. The opportunity to be able to sit in a room with somebody, even if it's a virtual self, is very, very useful. Now, we've been talking about the metaverse, different aspects of VR for some time. Some of that technology, some of the marketing has gotten ahead of itself, I think. It will come in time, but it's never going to fully take over from having one-to-one relationships, sometimes in person, sometimes not. But also, it's really important that we be able to maintain the human aspect of all of this. Creating cartoons of ourselves that don't have the ability to convey true expressiveness, excuse me for that, expressiveness of our faces. This is a major communicator for our species. I've written at length about the nature of artificial emotional intelligence, and the fact is that our faces and our inflection in our voices and everything else, we need this as part of our means of working with each other. Regulation and compliance and the laws, everybody loves to hate regulators. But the fact is that they serve a very, very important purpose. They protect our intellectual property. They hopefully level the playing field for all of the people involved. Not always works that way, but one of the biggest problems for regulation when it comes to technology is by being the kind of institution it is. Laws happen slowly. Compared to the pace of technological progress, they tend to fall behind very, very easily, very, very rapidly. So how can we work with this to kind of keep things in sync a little bit more? Because what tends to happen is once regulation gets far enough behind, just imagine right now we have a lot of current cryptocurrency issues that were never regulated. Well, what's going to happen, unfortunately, is that there's going to be a huge amount of social and political worry about it, and it's going to lead to regulators wanting to make too stringent laws. And that typically happens very frequently with new technologies as they get going. So how do we kind of keep that friction, keep it reduced, keep the regulations from falling too far out of sync? Well, one approach is technology assessment. As one example, the United States used to have an Office of Technology Assessment, which was a branch or an office of the US Congress. And the purpose of it was to have experts who actually went through and learned and distilled the complexities of new technologies so that Congress, the lawmakers who could not themselves become experts readily, could become better informed as they were making their laws. This was really useful until it got disbanded in about 1995 for political reasons. But that office had such a good reputation that idea was extended to many other countries, many of them in Europe, in the years that followed. Another aspect of technology assessment I think is very, very important is to actually build it into the development cycle when it comes to early technology and build it into this ecosystem. The fact is that there are so many things as you build a new technology that can go wrong that you don't anticipate could be used against you or society or what have you. So how do we provide safeguards as we build these new technologies and devices? One example I like to give is the early internet. When it was created in 1969, it was basically 4 nodes of government and universities that communicated with each other. Everybody knew everybody, everybody trusted everybody. A few years later, they released it, made the internet available to the public at large. Early 1990s, we start to see commerce come onto it in the form of the World Wide Web. And now we have all of these foundational holes from those early days that allow a range of malware, hacking, cybercrime, and so forth that had we had some consideration about the trust issues early on, might not actually be there now. In the end, we have all kinds of new technologies that are going to be developing, and these are just getting started. What you see on the screen are things that are here today. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, there are going to be some other really crazy things if you look out there. But what's really interesting is what happens when they operate in combination. Because you think about a drone. It flies, it does certain things, and then you combine it with, say, Internet of Things, you combine it with different types of sensors, other robotics, other geolocation. There's all kinds of things that start happening. You start getting unanticipated consequences, and this causes vulnerabilities. So when we look out to this, how can we anticipate? How can we predict or at least explore this vast domain of possibilities? Because believe me, that generates a huge combination very, very rapidly. So one possibility is quantum computing. We're getting very, very close. I've written a number of articles on this in recent years, and the possibility of offering quantum as a service, even available for startups, is definitely out there in a few years' time, because being able to use quantum computing provides an opportunity to do certain kinds of optimization that simply isn't possible on a serial computer. In the end, what it's about is about creating technologies that are beneficial for us. That's what we're really seeking to do. We want to be able to save lives, to keep people healthy, to improve their lifespans, their health spans, and hopefully also feed the world, to be able to improve the lives for as many people around us as we can. So as we do this, we want to really consider what kind of a world we're building with this. I'm running out of time. I'm going to just briefly say that I've written extensively about emotional AI. One of the areas that this incorporates is something that's being developed as apps currently with empathy as a service. The idea that you can use an app to help people get along better, which is really kind of a neat idea, but when I actually heard how they were using it, I was fascinated. It was the idea that in HR, in human resources, this was a way of potentially onboarding people from a range of different cultures, a range of different places and life experiences, so that they could get along a little bit better in the workplace, given the fact that these days we're drawing from all over the world. Where I live in Seattle, places like Silicon Valley, you have people literally coming from all corners of the earth to work in places, but they come with different expectations, different things offend different people. We don't know what's polite in one culture or another, and the purpose of this app is to essentially smooth some of that out, which is going to be really, really important as we start collaborating more and more on a global scale. Because ultimately, as I say, it's about networks. It's about having this broad set of connections, and ultimately, as diverse a group as possible. Whether we're talking about artificial intelligence, forecasting the future, doing different types of technology development, having as many different viewpoints, as many different life experiences involved is really, really helpful to being able to ensure that the technology serves as many people as possible, isn't biased against some people while helping others. These kinds of things can be avoided by using the right design best practices, and bringing in as many viewpoints as possible is one way. Ultimately, it's about creating the world we want and need to live in. We want to be able to create a tomorrow that is conducive to all of our lives, and ultimately create a future that all of us want to live in, is our preferred future for ourselves, our families, our businesses, and the generations to come. Thank you so much. Kamsahamnida.